Ever wondered how to edit and view files in Docker? Well, let's dive right in. Docker, for those who might not be in the know, is a powerful platform that's taken the world of IT by storm. It's a tool designed to make it easier to create, deploy, and run applications by using containers. These containers allow a developer to package up an application with all of the parts it needs, such as libraries and other dependencies, and ship it all out as one package. In essence, Docker is a bit like a virtual machine, but unlike a virtual machine, rather than creating a whole virtual operating system, Docker allows applications to use the same Linux kernel as the system that they're running on. This makes for a significant performance boost and reduces the size of the application. So why is Docker so important? It's all about simplicity and speed. Stay tuned as we unravel the steps to edit and view files in Docker. Before we dive into the process, let's understand what Docker files are. Docker files, in their simplest form, are text documents that are used to construct an image that can be run as a Docker container. These files are fundamentally important to the Docker environment as they provide the basis for creating Docker images. They're the blueprints, the architectural plans if you will, that Docker uses to build and run containers. They're the instructions for the Docker engine, detailing the steps to take to create a Docker image. Essentially, a Docker file is a sequence of executable command lines which perform various operations, such as setting an environment variable, adding files, or running a command. The Docker file is where you define the environment, dependencies, and the files that make up your application. Now let's touch upon the structure of a Docker file. A Docker file consists of a series of instructions and arguments. Each instruction is an uppercase word such as from, run, or copy, and they are followed by their arguments. The instructions tell Docker what to do, and the arguments specify what the instructions should operate on. A Docker file will always start with the from instruction. This instruction specifies the base image from which you are building. Run is another common instruction used to execute a command during the build process. Copy is used to add files from your Docker client's current directory. One of the most important aspects of a Docker file is its reproducibility. That is, the ability to use the same Docker file to create the same Docker image every time. This reproducibility is crucial for consistent application deployment and scaling, making Docker files an essential tool in the modern IT landscape. So, to put it simply, Docker files are the backbone of any Docker application. They are the instructions, the blueprints that guide the creation of Docker containers. They ensure consistency, reliability, and predictability in the Docker environment. Now that we understand Docker files, we can proceed to explore how to edit and view them. So you've got your Docker file, but how do you make changes to it? Well, let's dive into the process of editing Docker files. Docker files are essentially text files that contain all the commands in order needed to build a given image. To edit these files, we need to use a text editor. You can use any text editor that you are comfortable with. It could be Nano, Vim, Emacs, or even Visual Studio Code if you prefer a graphical interface. Now let's say you have a Docker file named Dockerfile. To edit this file, you would open it in your text editor of choice. For instance, if you're using Nano, the command would be nano dockerfile. This will open the Docker file in the Nano text editor. Here you can make your necessary changes. Maybe you need to update the base image or add new instructions. Remember, each line in a Docker file represents a layer in the Docker image. So, when you're adding or editing lines, you're actually modifying the layers of your Docker image. After you've made your changes, it's time to save and exit. In Nano, you would do this by pressing Ctrl+X, then Y to confirm the changes, and finally Enter to save the changes with the same file name. If you're using Vim, after making your changes, you'd hit ESC, type WQ, and then press Enter. And if you're using Emacs, you'd hit Ctrl+X, then Ctrl+S to save, and Ctrl+XE, followed by Ctrl+C to exit, and there you have it. You've successfully made changes to your Docker file. Just remember to build your Docker image after editing the Docker file. This can be done with the docker build command followed by the T option and the name you want to give to your new image. Editing Docker files is that simple. But how about viewing them? After editing your Docker files, you'd want to view them. Let's see how. In the world of Docker, we have a handy command to help us view files. The cat command, short for concatenate, allows us to display the content of Docker files. For instance, if you've made changes to a Docker file named dockerfile.txt, you can view it by typing cat dockerfile.txt into your terminal. But what if you're dealing with a large file and you only want to see the first few lines? Docker has got you covered. The head command allows you to display the first 10 lines of a file. If you need to see more or less, you can specify the number of lines by typing head and followed by the number of lines you want to view and the name of the file. Similarly, if you want to view the last few lines of a file, you can use the tail command. Just like the head command, tail displays the last 10 lines by default, but you can specify the number of lines you want to see. Finally, to view a file in a more readable format, you can use the less command. This command lets you navigate through the file page by page, making it easier to read large files. And that's how you view Docker files. Let's summarize what we've learned today. We've covered a lot today, so let's quickly summarize. We started with a lively engagement with Docker, followed by a dive into the basics of Docker files. We then moved on to the nitty-gritty of editing files in Docker, which was quite a learning journey. Finally, we explored how to view files in Docker, giving you a comprehensive understanding of the workings of Docker files. With these steps, you're now ready to edit and view files in Docker like a pro. Thanks for watching.